meeting to order. And great, so thanks everybody for being here, and Director Liebig, thank you for being here in Latasha's place while she's out of town. Director Ressler, thank you for joining the P&G committee. This is where we have all the fun. I believe you've sat in on some of our meetings before. First item on the agenda is to examine and potentially approve the minutes of the May 3rd meeting. Entertain a motion or any suggestions?
Oh, we're going to move to approve minutes. I'd like to move to approve those minutes.
And you weren't here, so. Right, so you're going to second that?
Sure.
All right, all in favor of approving minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. I would say they were accurate with the way we left things last on May 3rd. It seems so long ago. Moving on to section B of the agenda, the ends policies for reading, writing, and fine arts. We can take them one at a time. The purpose of ends policies essentially is so that we know what we are striving towards in each of our subject areas. Obviously, the first couple paragraphs give us a good rundown of why we have ends policies, and later on when we get into Appendix 1, we'll see under Board Policy Development why we develop ends policies. But specifically with reading, anything to start off with? Director Liebig, Director Ressler? I've been through this a couple years ago, so.
I'm just reading down that footnote.
Are you up and running?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I have some reservations about it just because it's so focused on achievement scores, test scores.
Right. So, is that what Diane sent today?
Well, that's part of it. Her concern was
First was in Appendix 4, that's
Yeah,
right.
it
But
was in
it
Appendix
somewhat
4.
ties into this.
part of it's the accountability piece that we have from the federal and the state government.
Well, I know, but it makes it sound, I don't mind that we have these, standardized tests to see what's going on, but it seems to reduce everything to that. Also, I wonder about, and I don't know how it works with this type of thing, but doing some of this at the law school, do as little as I can. I know some of it's happening where we're being asked to draft learning outcomes and then an assessment regime, et cetera. Not quite like this one, but still coming. And it seemed like this would be the place for learning outcomes. I'm not sure this is the right place for, to talk about the assessment of those outcomes. Like the first sentence strikes me as a learning outcome that'd be hard to object to. Which gets
Right.
specific about, A, how we're going to assess it, and B, the assessment goals. Seems to me sort of like mixing two concepts.
I see what you're saying. I do like at least that with the, when they refer to achievement, it appears to be open-ended.
It's not really defined. What
Right.
do you mean by achievement?
Right. It's not like it's saying on standardized tests. It's not saying,
Right, but to talk about achievement without defining it and say that it's going to increase at a rate greater than the national average for cohort groups,
seems to imply that there's something.
First of all, an unrealistic goal, if you're talking about standardized tests, at some point that's not going to happen every year.
Things I would recommend keeping is a focus on the bottom quartile. That their levels just maintaining won't be acceptable, but increasing will be the goal. And that the upper quartile will maintain or increase annually.
Now, the other thing, maybe I'm just not looking at the right section, but it seems as if what we have in this category is entirely about reading comprehension. And that there's nothing in this list anywhere for things like literature, appreciation of literature, covered by this category. Do we have no goals for our students when it comes to exposure and appreciation of literature?
That's actually an interesting point. So, I mean, that's that seems to me to be encompassed in the first sentence. Students will over time independently read increasing complex text with understanding. How do you measure appreciation?
Well, I'm not saying you can measure it, but I don't think that should exclude it as a goal. And there are ways to measure things that aren't numerically reducible, but then you get into qualitative things, which, I don't know, some people would call that a form of assessment.
Well, so, and maybe part of this goes back to when we hit Appendix 1 with the little flow chart for ends policies. I don't think of an ends, maybe I misspoke before, I don't think of an ends policy necessarily as a goal. I mean, according to and I don't want to skip ahead, but the three questions we should be asking are, is the goal important in its own right rather than a means to an end? Is it one of the main reasons we have schools? And is it a top priority that needs to be driven by a specific board policy? So the real value judgment here is what we're doing here. Is this ends policy? Is this a top priority to have an appreciation, to measure appreciation?
Well, I wouldn't focus exclusively on that word. But I do think there is something about literature and studying literature that's not captured by reading comprehension. And again, here I am. I'm just stirring up the pot, and I'm not going to come back to the next meeting, right? So.
No, I know.
But if it were me, I'd be interested in somehow capturing that with somehow in this, and even the heading reading. I'm not sure. Yes, you can use that heading, but that's sort of a common complaint these days. Is that school is now about reading comprehension and not really about literature. And as a result, they read excerpts and blurbs instead of actual books. And I'm sure it's exaggerated, but I think there's some truth to it. And
and if you look at writing, looking at writing, the first, I think what you're looking for would happen in the first sentence of the reading, because look at the writing. It says increasingly complex text with meaning, clarity, and purpose, and application of standard conventions. So that's saying more than increasingly complex text, right? So I understand what you're saying. So you're saying students will over time independently read increasing complex text with understanding and something.
yeah, I'm not sure we're going to be able to just write it off the cuff right here.
But it should be easy enough as just a few words. What do you think, Paul? Jump in the fray here, Paul.
I don't know, I was going to try and pull up if there's anything in the actual curriculum in there. Apart from click that I was trying to pull up. Link.
Well, Chris, to your point, I think we have a lot of things in our standards and benchmarks that probably address, some of the other issues you don't think are represented in the ends policy part of there. I mean, I guess when I look through these, I see those as like, what are your end goals? What are those things you can measure and do measure and look at consistently? The reading piece is part of the board's strategic plan as well. In the end policy statement, it says there's other goals the district may have that are not necessarily included here as well, other academic goals, but then there's also that link that does lift them off to, some of those other pieces that are important pieces for our kids to learn that may not be detailed there.
And I can give you just some historical context. When I got here 7 years ago, there was no fine arts, there was no character ed, and it was really designed to reflect the increasing level of accountability that the state and the federal government hold us to. So there's some direct parallels to that accountability piece, and maybe one way to think about it is, and we had this conversation, back when I first came on the board before we added fine arts and character, as ends policies that they're not everything that we want the kids to know and be able to do as they exit the system. But they provide, in some cases, and I wouldn't want to, from a de minimis standpoint, I wouldn't want to say that that's the minimum that we want kids to know and be able to do, but that provides some context within the accountability measure for our expectations for kids. And that was the original purpose of it. Now, obviously, adding fine arts and character isn't in line with that because those aren't part of the accountability matrix. Those aren't things that we measure through any state or federal requirement. So
Right, which
that's why
I have
there's,
my qualms about character
yeah.
education with
Right.
fine arts, I'm gonna throw it in there. I mean, part of what I think you could do with a document like this is, I don't want to say push back against accountability, but push back against the reduction of everything to the few things that we're forced to do by the federal government. I understand I'm gonna list everything in here, but that one kind of left out of me just because of that criticism that you hear a lot of. Well, it used to be students read books and now they just reading comprehension.
Well, there's another word in the first sentence though that kind of sticks out, but independently. Independently read increasingly complex text with understanding. Independently implies to me something that they would choose to read, which I would think,
Well, I was going to mention that too.
hope point to an appreciation for what they're reading.
We
But
want them to be inclined to do it, not just to be able to do it.
Mm.
right.
Although independently, me, I read it differently. I
Or you're
like
thinking
it.
independently as in instead of group reading.
Well, or without help.
yeah, without support.
Okay. Hmm. So perhaps a sentence that, just a second sentence that, reading, something to the effect of reading is, independent reading is the crux of free thinking society. I don't know. I don't know. I'm reaching.
Well, it'd have to be in the form of an outcome, though, which one.
I get what you're saying. There's a contrast when we get on to writing. So maybe what we do is move on to writing and bounce back to reading. So just get stuck on reading. Because the bullet points, I hear what you're saying about, you have something, Paul? You want to go through?
Wait till you're done talking about this, and I have a question.
The bullet points, I understand what you're saying about the achievement, measuring achievement. But I think you'll find that's fairly uniform throughout the other ends policies as well. Yes, sir.
Maybe Steve or Matt can help. In that top part of the ends policy, when it has the link to the curriculum areas, if you click on that, every time I click on it, it says the page doesn't exist. Is that
Perfect.
Well, that's helpful.
Sometimes our cross references aren't what they're, yeah, I can see.
What do you know? I get a dead link on that too.
I can change that. Well, yeah, I can change
Well, maybe
that.
if we just follow it from the site through the departments.
None of them are linked.
See, the CSIP one is linked. That one went right through.
Mm-mm.
That one work?
Yeah, that works
Oh, I
fine.
didn't, oh.
Your CSIP one didn't work?
Mm.
See, the other one worked for me when I was inside last time, so I wonder what's up with that.
Curriculum. There we go.
I do get curriculum areas, but I follow that path. Seems to be just something about the way
Yeah,
the things laid out. You can get there.
It might be
through the
that,
site,
it might be that space
you can't get there from
in your
here.
curriculum areas.
Maybe.
Not working.
Oh, actually, I just, when you
Yep.
look at the site, you just get a string of numbers.
It's a string of numbers, yep. So we can change that.
Yep, it's just a bad link.
But then over on the right-hand side, language arts is very well, yes.
Oh, shoot.
Self-study.
On the left, you'll see links, and then it shows Language Arts 7 Essential Learnings, Language Arts 8 Essential Learnings, and Iowa Core Literacy Standards.
So core literacy standards can cover high school stuff, or
Mhm.
was it like a 7 and 8 separated out?
Yeah, the lift off there is, it actually takes you to the K-12 page, but you can break down by grade
And
level.
of course, we're required to go by the Iowa core, right?
Right. So I guess the point I was just trying to make is if there's things you're concerned about, maybe aren't specifically stated in the ends policy, there's still some of that that would be related back to things we are asking kids to do. I think that, I mean, my look at the ends policies is what are you measuring back to evaluate your overall program, right? I mean, in those areas. So I think
Yeah,
those are the big.
That measurement
Big
emphasis
chunks.
is the part that bothers me.
Well, and I think you're going to hear Amy and I start to talk to you a lot more about growth instead of those just straight proficiency numbers too. I mean, we've had a lot of conversations about that now, moving away from the No Child Left Behind about national percentile ranks and some of those things. I mean, really, we have to do a better job of focusing on individual student growth and where are they starting and where they ended up and where do we eventually need to get to. So I think the percentile ranks kind of, it's a do or die approach. Like you either made it or you didn't. And so there's more story behind there with each of those. So that's another thing with the, whatever you're reporting for the data. Is it the growth measure? Is it just a straight proficiency? You're either proficient or not, or what are you asking for? But all of your ends policies are written, with the same verbiage per se around those things.
I mean, part of me wonders what are we thinking this function of this ends policy document is, given that we're stuck with the Iowa core no matter what.
Oh, and you're stuck with the state report card, no
Yeah,
matter what.
right.
Yeah, so those are all linked together, differentiated accountability. I mean, those pieces are all third grade retention, all that stuff is all interwoven. And it's all built on the same assessment premise. So, you do those state assessments, whether they're the Iowa assessments or eventually the SBAC assessments, and that's what the state report card is built on. That's what the differentiated accountability system is based on. That's what third grade retention is based on. So I think that although the name of the game has changed and it's ESSA now and not No Child Left Behind, it's a change in name only in some senses. I mean, there's some other significant changes in there that'll really be a benefit for us. But from the accountability standpoint, it's still there. It's
So
still
what would be
there.
the difference between a world in which we have this document and a world in which we either don't have it or it just says, we will pursue the goals set for us by the state of Iowa?
These are higher than what Iowa sets as a requirement.
Fine arts, for example.
Yeah, whether it's character ed, fine arts, even in these assessment areas, because we now no longer live in Lake Wobegon, so it's not that 100% of kids have to be proficient under ESSA. So these thresholds would actually be higher than what ESSA sets for the state as a whole in terms of proficiency.
So does it make sense to think of this document as the place where we describe how we're going to go above and beyond what's required of us from the state?
Yeah, that'd be one way to look at it. And not only above and beyond, like you said, in the 4 core areas, but also in arts, fine arts, and in character. So. It's a struggle, I think. I think from the standpoint of when you think about ends policies, in an organizational climate in which there is less accountability externally than we have, I think that the ends policies serve an incredibly important role of holding yourselves as an organization accountable. But to your point earlier, if we don't have ends policies,
We still have-
state's still going to test us and we're still getting a report card. So we could choose to ignore the state, can't ignore the state testing, we could ignore the state report card. Maybe you're trying to find a silver lining in the cloud here. I mean, this at least requires us to pay attention to that data with an effort to improve it. But yeah, to your earlier point, absent the ends policies, none of that accountability is going away.
I have a crazy question. If we added 2 words to that first sentence, would it achieve what you're thinking? If we added increasingly complex and challenging text.
Still sounds to me like you need comprehension. But, you know, I think with all these policy reviews, you get to the point where you say, well, if we were doing this from scratch, maybe we would do it differently. But there's only so many hours in the day.
Yep. Yeah, keep in mind, you know, from a date standpoint, I mean, if you look at if you go to the bottom of the document, you know, you see that these were originally drafted in 2000, so drafted about 17 years ago, drafted when No Child Left Behind was, you know, starting to ramp up, that whole accountability metric was ramping up, so it gives you a little bit of perspective about where they came from and why they're here.
Well, you know, again, just kind of keep circling back to them to see. I guess I view it as an opportunity with boards now, in the past and in the future, to exert a little bit of influence on what we're shooting for. And so, you know, if there's something that this committee thinks, you know, is worthwhile making a change, then we go for it. Otherwise, I say there's no glaring issues with it and move on. But if you want to make a change, then let's figure out what the change is.
I guess if it were up to me, and again, I don't know if we can write this, but 7 o'clock, but,
We have more to do too, so.
but I would incorporate a little more to that first sentence, again, to try to cover beyond just reading comprehension. And then maybe in the bullet points, I think some of them are kind of silly. Maybe I'd reduce the achievement stuff to, you know, the increasing this and that to one bullet point. I'd add a few bullet points for, again, kind of cultivating some kind of intrinsic motivation to do these things.
I would recommend against changing the bullet points. I don't have a problem with adding something in the first sentence, but the bullet points are kind of uniform throughout all of the ends policies.
Well, I know it's domino effect when we do these things.
I think
I don't
that's
mind
something
bullet
that,
point, you know, again, focusing on the bottom quarter, et cetera, but,
what I see happening is 3 years from now, a future board looking at reading and going, why the hell are the bullet points different in that one than all the others?
well, you never change it, but that was because you're only doing 2 at a time every year.
I'm just saying,
Well,
I don't.
that's kind of what I would do. I don't think we can do it. I don't think we can compose it today. I'm not going to be here next time the committee meets. So I say maybe if I'm not getting too much of a reception, either wait till Latasha comes back and then dispose of it, or just dispose of it tonight. And we can vote one way or the other. I don't mean to create a giant project for a committee that I'm not
No, I
actually
think,
permanently
no,
on.
I think there's value to the thought process that you're having regarding the purpose of, and it's reflected in other areas. If you look at writing, and if you look onto science, which I know we didn't look at, but science, it says, increasingly complex scientific information and the processes of inquiry to construct scientific knowledge. You know, there's a couple extra words in there that, you know, if we could extend that sentence just a little bit, or a few words that encompass what you're trying to say, I'm not against that at all. I think there's value to that. And I think it's a good suggestion. So we can circle back to it.
It's the type of thing that if I were on the committee, I would say, I'll do that for homework for next time. You
No, I know.
be here next time. Why don't we keep going on?
I can do it for homework and bring it back to the rest of the committee the next time, and then we can,
I've given you homework, so.
It's fine.
Why don't we look at the other?
I'll write something amazing, incredible. Writing. Students will, over time, independently write increasingly complex text with meaning, clarity, and purpose, and application of standard conventions. Again, that's got that little bit extra. It still has the achievement part, which I'm sure. Now, Steve, real quick, I just want to, the reason there's no focus on the lower quartile is because though that is, writing is not measured by state assessments, correct?
No, writing is not measured by state assessment.
Okay.
So
Better
we've
remember
got
discussion.
literacy, which is reading,
Yeah,
math, science, social studies.
okay. Oh, there it is, specific goals for students who are struggling, okay.
So what about the other bullet points that talk about achievement? How's that measuring writing? Well, how do they measure writing for other purposes?
There's district writing assessments that we do.
They go all the way through high school?
Do the new ones go all the way through high school?
No, there's certain years we
Yeah.
do those assessments.
Oh,
So we
right.
try to mirror them as a second assessment for the state, so we mirror those, usually grades 8 and 11.
Yeah,
Okay, so this still extends into high school.
right.
And because the second bullet point refers back to the national average for cohort groups, are these district writing assessments that we do, are they somehow tethered to national? Okay.
I mean, the closest thing we could look at is AP scores in our writing, you know, to compare national scores, but I think I think we'd be having a hard time making those comparisons as that bullet point states.
First bullet point says grade group, second bullet point says cohort groups. Is there a difference?
Yeah.
Cohort refer to other breakdowns?
Intact cohort,
What do you mean?
So one grade group is from one third grade class to the next third grade class to the next third, right? And then cohort group is that third grade class, fourth grade class, fifth grade
So you're
class.
measuring it's the same kids every year?
So yeah, you'd be following a group of kids
Right.
through versus the grade
Just
levels.
the
We'd be
grade
looking
level.
at third grades or
so you're looking at
graders
third
over
grade, or
time.
you're looking at the kids that were second grade that are now third graders, so that
But
you
it's
can
not
actually.
like taking low SES and comparing that to
No.
other people's low SES.
No, it's the kids that survived from last year's second grade whose scores we have.
So the first bullet point is saying that next year's third grade class will have as high or higher than the previous year's third grade class. But the second bullet point is saying that as a cohort group, right, as a cohort group, you're looking at, oh, no, never
They're,
mind.
yeah, you're right, and they're gonna increase
Yeah.
greater than national average.
Well,
So that
that's-
cohort, as it progresses through the system, is gonna do better than national average.
It's kind of in this underlying portion that is, that's above where it says global ends policies, level 1, there's one of those levels. Defines the difference between grade groups and cohort groups, so.
Have we actually been increasing at a rate greater than the national average? Greater than the rate of increase among the national? Still getting my head, trying to get my head around.
The rate would be a harder one, and I'm not sure how we figure that. I think when you look at our achievement scores, you'd see our groups do score ahead of the national average. I mean, that, we
Yeah,
show
that's
that a lot in
bit
that
of
data, but
increasing
the
at a
rate piece, I'm not sure
Yeah.
we really ever break it down for you that way.
I got my doubts about these achievement prongs, you know, especially on a thing like writing.
So that third bullet point where it says the national percentile rank associated with this average will be reported each year, what are we reporting right now?
Sorry, what bullet point, Ryan?
Sorry, third bullet point under writing.
Under writing.
Performance on the average.
Last sentence, the national percentile rank associated with this average will be reported each year.
So yeah, we report the NPR of
Yeah,
the students in the top quartile.
Thank you.
if you look at your kids' test scores, you see the NPR number. That's what that is.
Okay, thanks. Director Wrestler, anything to say about writing? Anything to write about writing?
It's kind of a really aggressive third bullet point when you think about how many of our students are in that national quarter when we showed
Right.
that,
It is.
that data point
It's like
before.
over
that-
2/3 of our
That
kids
many
are
kids
top
to
quartile.
maintain
Right.
that, that's a big goal. Good one, but good, but big.
Let me see if I can make sure I understand this. The performance of the average student in the top quarter of the distribution. Will be maintained, will increase annually.
So the top quarter probably puts them in the top 10% nationally, right? The average student in the top quarter of the ICCSD is probably going to be top 10% nationally, give or take.
So much of that is driven by demographics. The demographics of the district change. We're going to be in a different spot compared to nationally. Of course, we don't want to resign ourselves to having it go down, but seems to imply a sense of control over this stuff that might be, you know, we can do everything we can do, we can't guarantee results on these. It's not that aspiration, yes.
Well, my only concern with writing is that if we, I mean, unless, I guess maybe it's that metric that when we're increasing at a rate greater than the second bullet point, on average achievement will increase at a rate greater than the national average for coworkers. My only concern is that it sounds like that would be hard. That's hard to meet unless we define what the metric is. But I think we don't want to define what the metric is because we're not defining it in reading. So I'm just talking in circles. Circumlocution. I'm tempted to leave writing as is. Not because it's too hard, but because I don't think it needs to be touched. Anyone feel it?
That's what you do.
I think I would agree with what Brandon was probably all right. I'm not opposed to, like you guys talked about, going back to reading and trying to figure out the literature appreciation part.
Brian, can I suggest something? I think a good time, well, I'm going to start talking anyways, and not leave my answer, sorry. A good time to look at
No,
these.
don't suggest anything. We'll just sit here and stare.
Because it kind of seems like maybe there's a couple fundamental issues with just the way they're written. You know, we're going to take Iowa assessments here in two weeks anyways, and, you know, the impact that these ends policies have on those assessments at this point is pretty much nil, right? And then so next year, we're not quite sure what that assessment's going to be yet. I mean, I honestly believe it's probably going to be smarter balanced assessments. That's probably what we'll be giving. And maybe that's a good time to kind of know, okay, this is going to be our formalized measure. These are the other things the district has in place. And then maybe try to do something with those ends policies from a usability standpoint. You know, are we going to have MPRs, or is that the valuable thing to look at, or will we be looking at growth measures at that point and trying to leave room? So I don't know if any some kind of substantive change is going to make sense right now, but you know, some significant change to these at some point would probably behoove this committee to look at all these areas and just rewrite them to reflect maybe what our measures are at that point. But until we have those measures in place, you know, we could wordsmith all this, and I'm not sure it's gonna make a big difference anyways. Does that make sense?
It's fine. It does make sense. I was gonna say, what might define arts? Because I
That one
don't,
I can do something.
because there's like
It
two
says dying
typos.
arts.
What does it say?
Say.
What does it say?
Dying arts.
Yeah, I was gonna find,
That would
and
be
Dying.
terrible for me
It should be fine arts, and then will increase over time, 2 words, not over time. Over time would be like
Oh, geez.
what happens in a football
How is it, how
game.
many times have you read this and I didn't, I never saw that? The Dine Arts at the end?
Yep. And the first bullet point.
On the second bullet point,
I like diner.
I like overtime on the arts
I
too.
understand that you want the percentage of students from the subgroup of poverty to increase. Number seems like a whole different thing. If we got lucky and all of a sudden everybody in the district, won the lottery and was no longer poor, we're not going to increase the number of students who are in the subgroup of poverty are doing these things. It's the percentage that we want to increase.
I would actually change that, believe it or not, from the, what's the, I want to say students identified as having the most barriers to learning, but what's the phraseology that I want to use? Students who need the most support. What was this phrase, Steve, that was suggested by Director Deloach? Instead of students facing
No,
barriers.
we're using opportunity now.
What is it?
We're using opportunity.
Okay, opportunity.
So for instance, there are now opportunity transportation zones.
So how do we describe the students who
What I'm saying is that instead of leaving
fall into that
the
category?
number and percent of students from the subgroup.
We're not describing though.
So here's the thing, when fine arts was written, there was still an equity or a diversity policy,
Right,
which is why I think that subgroup of poverty is sitting in there.
probably.
Probably not the right.
So it's probably not the right phrase, and I want it to be more encompassing of not just
Well,
kids who are,
we're looking at students who,
What's the,
when Natasha and I talked about it, we're looking at the exact opposite of saying barriers, and so
Right.
that's why we were saying opportunities, and so you might think about it, I'm just winging it here, students who require additional opportunities, that type of thing is what you're looking at, not looking at them in a deficit, but looking at them in an asset standpoint. So I've got to figure out how to say that in such a way that
students requiring the most support, students.
that even sounds deficit. Latasha and I's conversation is really to try to turn it into asset language, not deficit language. And some of these things are it's tough. You struggle with it.
strategic goals call out students in protected classes, maybe?
And then I'm just
Then
channeling
that's-
her.
then that's
She's not
gender,
here.
Then that's.
I'm channeling her, and she's really pushing me hard to make sure that I don't use deficit language. So I'm trying at all costs not to.
Well, maybe he's got to come up with a phrase.
Now, you could not specify subgroups of poverty. You could just talk about disaggregated subgroups, because that would, by our
Yes.
national requirements, because that includes special education students, students that receive ELL services, various ethnicities that we measure. There are, if you look at, I don't have it, well, I do have it with me. One of the things that we're going to be looking at, that Diane sent.
Yep.
I know I got it in there somewhere. Maybe not easily accessible. That one piece that Diane sent us, if you look at of course not, I don't have it handy. But if you look at those charts that she sent in the back, oh no, you didn't get that one. That's we're looking at that for something else. But you look at them all, and it's male, female. It's FRL, non-FRL, ELL, non-ELL, special ed, non-special ed.
But if those are all disaggregated groups, we can't possibly increase the percentage of all of them. Male goes up, female goes down.
Yeah.
Female goes up, male goes down.
Yeah, although maybe it's measured disaggregated subgroups that we're required to, because we're not required to look at men or women as separate
But
groups.
required disaggregated subgroups.
Yeah. So that's a very awkward way to say that. And Natasha's probably not going to give me points on that being asset language instead of deficit language, and I would agree with her on it. So but I'm, off the top of my head, I'm not sure exactly how we look at it from that standpoint, how we phrase it. Thinking about that. Let's see if I can come up with something. Let's see.
And mark that as more homework. That would be a good one, though, to get.
If you think about it, I mean, it is kind of that required disaggregated subgroups. That's the groups that you're talking about. Those are the groups that you want to make sure have, because it's not just poverty kids, you know, from a fine arts standpoint, we want to make sure that language isn't a barrier to kids taking those classes. We want to make sure that special education status isn't a barrier to those kids taking classes. We want to make sure that whether it's on campus or off campus, that all kids have opportunities, and those that may have not had those opportunities in the past, that we're particularly focused on making sure they get those opportunities.
Could we
Well-
talk in terms of increasing diversity of those activities, enrollment in those activities?
I would almost say that we circle back around to it with Director Deloach at the table
Yeah,
and get her input
she
on
may
that.
have some good asset language for us to use.
Because I mean, considering that fine arts is sometimes, just like athletics, fine arts might be the one thing that a kid feels like invested in that
Mhm.
makes them part of the school, whether it's, you know, music or acting or whatever, or more traditional art, you know, metal sculpting, whatever. But my point is that I think that it's important to focus on that, to give kids something that they relate to. But I also don't want it to be just flat out offensive like we have right now. So I think we can improve it. I'd like Director Deloach's input if that's okay. We can kick that down the road a little bit.
I think we just gotta, I mean, you just have to figure out what you really mean, say, parent.
Right.
And find the words for it.
But I'd hate to come out and say, ta-da, here's what we wrote, and be told that that's no better or worse. Okay. Well, that's taken more time than I thought. But circle back to reading, circle back to fine arts.
Matt, are you saying to even pause on the reading one until after assessment? Or is that just?
Yeah, I mean, my thought would be if you're gonna make some kind of significant change to how you word them, you can just address them all. You know, at that same time, I know you have a schedule for review, but if you're gonna start to change them, to your point about, so you don't go back and look at one and say, why is it so much different? You know, it just might make sense to line them all up at the same time when you know what you're aligning them to.
Well, I meant tackle reading from the appreciation side of things, not from the bullet point side of things. There were two, I heard two concerns with
Right,
reading.
that's true.
Yeah.
I heard two different concerns. One is how we're measuring it, and one is what we aren't measuring. So, I mean, if what we aren't measuring, the appreciation side of it, you know, a couple words here or there, that's one thing. But yeah, taking Matt's suggestion, coming back to it, we have a firmer idea of what future assessments will look like. Look like crowded computer labs is what they'll look like. But I didn't say that out loud.
Maybe they'll look like kids on Chromebooks in
That's
their
right.
classroom.
That's what I was gonna say. I didn't.
At the elementary level?
But,
Eventually.
yeah, yeah, no,
Awesome.
start to go around.
So, real quick, I did, with appendix 1, 4, and 8, I'd like to start in backwards order, if that's okay. Appendix 8 is the charters for the committees. Just going to make a quick suggestion that, number 1, we write a charter for the finance committee, because we don't have that right now. And that's homework that will not be, should be over.
What the heck?
I have some ideas, just follow the uniformity of the other ones.
My
with,
board docs.
The stated purpose of it, and the structure, and the membership, and so on and so forth. The second thing
Oh, there you go.
is,
Put it back. I don't know.
With the Charter for Policy and Engagement Committee, we should change that to Policy and Governance Committee. And there's a whole bunch of things that need to be struck from that since now that we've gone, since the last time we did this. The last
Been a
time we
while.
did this, it was called the, do you remember this?
Mhm.
It was Charter for the Governance Committee.
Mhm.
And then we changed it to Policy and Engagement. And now we're undoing it. Did this too long. But there's a whole bunch of bullet points that need to be struck from there that no longer fall under policy and governance that used to be part of policy and engagement. Anything that involves engaging, out. And I have those marked. I have, if you can see where I'm looking, under purpose, items 2 and 3. Under responsibilities, items 4 through 9. And then I didn't see any changes to make with operations. And with education committee, I wanted to suggest something with that as well.
Yeah, it keeps referring to 3 members.
Yes. Under committee chair,
Delete the word 3.
yeah, I had that struck too. One of the 3, I was just gonna say, one of the duly appointed committee members will be elected by the committee members, redundancy department.
Mhm.
So one of the duly appointed, so it's not even duly appointed because it's a committee of the whole,
Technically, I guess we've all appointed everybody.
right?
You could just say one of the committee members,
Will be elected by,
committee, or by the others, no, by the committee, I guess.
so
The
strike,
chair.
so will be elected by the committee and strike members. Because right now it's,
Committee of the members.
right now it says one of the duly appointed committee members will be elected by committee members.
Because there was the committee chair.
It doesn't have to be a board member, correct?
No, so, well, the way we've got it, only board members are on that. Well, no. Because it could
No,
be-
because
we
there's
have
Brady
the,
and-
Yeah.
Teachers union people. That's interesting. Well, maybe we have to specify if we want to say it's going to be a board member, we don't have to. Fine.
Well, if you think about it, the committee chair is basically just running the meeting,
Right.
so it technically could be somebody else
It could.
if they were really a glutton for punishment.
Well, that's why I'm asking if it should say committee or
Yeah.
the board, because the committee
Well,
itself.
the way it says though, membership, the committee will be a committee of the whole with administration participation and 3 ICAE members. Does that mean members of the ICAA or they're members of the committee? Are they members of the committee?
Brady, think.
Or are they participants but not members of the committee? Do they vote on things?
No.
I don't think you ever voted.
No, but I don't
anything
know if there are
last
any
meeting,
votes that
so-
come out of that board or out of that committee. Now, technically, it's committee of the whole, so if you really want to get right down in Robert's Rules of Order, a committee of the whole is the board. So therefore, if the board wants to take action at a committee meeting in a committee of the whole, they have a legal right to do so.
Except this might prevent them from doing that, the way we worded this.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it would prevent them from doing that.
Provide, well, you know, it talks about passing the proposal along to the board. I don't know if it would prevent it either, but at least there's something in here that, if we
I-
wanted to, we could.
I would
set
like,
it up.
I would actually say that we should make sure that it's clear that,
The most they can do is recommend things to the full board,
right,
even if we are the full board.
right. That the full board and committee can only recommend things to the full board. I would like to avoid a situation where there's decisions being made while meeting at Kirkwood Elementary School.
Yeah, I think so.
Or at least insinuations that a decision was made.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, if the entire committee recommends something to the board will do that thing. But at least there'd be an opportunity for public comment at a regular board meeting
Yes.
before we did that thing.
Yes. So we could add language there easily. As this is a committee of the whole, no binding board decisions will be made with,
No decision of the committee will be final until approved by the full board or regular board meeting, something like that.
Yes.
I also have one other question about membership. When it specifically says 3 ICEA members, does that mean,
Yeah, we could clarify that.
yeah,
Are they members of the committee? With votes on the committee or not?
but also are those only teachers or educators that are in the ICEA?
It certainly sounds like that. Interesting. How about we said ICEA representatives? The ICEA would choose who to send, which is kind of what they do anyways, right? Chances are they will only send from members.
I would even take out ICEA. I would say 3,
Staff members. Chosen by the committee.
or who are willing to serve on the committie,
Right, drafted against their will.
anointed by the committee. I mean, should we keep it ICEA? It seems pretty weird that we're naming the union.
Well, they don't represent all the teachers, and that is occasionally a problem.
Yeah,
However,
we don't have anybody else who does, that's the problem.
the rest are unrepresented, and so therefore, there's no way to turn to them from a nomination standpoint. So that's always a problem we have. I'll give you an example with support staff. You know, we've got a support staff association that has 7 members, and yet it represents the entire category of people. So we will make calls occasionally to say we are gathering a group, we are asking the ICEA to nominate teachers. If you are not an ICEA member and you would like to self-nominate, please do. We rarely get people that do that. So
How about 3 ICA nominated members?
yeah,
Because I don't like this as 3 ICEA members.
yeah, you could do
Very
that.
fine distinction, though, they're not gonna nominate people, aren't members.
Understood. But the way we have it written right now, it means that they have to
Right.
be dues-paying members.
No worse
of
than
it.
what we have right now, right?
Right.
Again, I feel like it's less of an issue if they're not actually voting members of the committee.
Right.
And it sort of sounds like they're not, the way that's worded. I mean, with administration participation is so vague, it can't possibly mean that's voting members, that clause, right? And so the next clause probably to me would also be non-voting members, but it would be good to clarify.
I'd like to jump back to the committee chair just to make sure I have this right now. One of the duly appointed committee members will be elected by the committee to serve as the committee chair.
Or it's just a chair.
Oh.
One of the duly appointed committee members will be elected by the committee to serve as the chair.
There you go. Although you could take out duly appointed if you wanted to. That goes without saying.
Now, we're still leaning towards it should be a board member who's the committee chair.
Well, if the board members are the only voting members, to me, that's what you're saying. However, if the other two get
You can
votes,
be
then
the
we're opening the
committee
door
chair.
unless we specify.
Kim is committee
No,
chair.
thank you. I'm just saying, nope.
Oh.
And she brings treats.
On
That's
Sunday.
why you're committee chair.
And, you know, if we actually were going to give these other people votes, I wouldn't object to them potentially being the chair of the committee. But it doesn't make any sense if they're not voting members to be able to chair the committee.
You're just talking votes of the board did.
I'm talking about if the committee has to vote on recommending somebody to the board, you know.
Do your other committees vote?
Oh, that's what I
We vote on stuff, right?
We just,
Usually only by affirmation to send
Yeah.
something to the board. There's usually no vote on it. There's no vote required.
Yeah.
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 But it's affirmation of sitting board members, right?
Yeah, I'm not affirming.
Right.
Right.
Seems odd that you would extend it out to anybody but the board members, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out how to word that. That's
Yeah.
all. So it looks like there's already language under accountability about board action. Expected to identify changes needed as outlined in the responsibilities. Actions must be referred back to the board for approval and implementation by the full Board of Education. We'll just add a board meeting. Right? Add a. Right. Add a scheduled meeting of the board, of the full board, right? Words. So one of the duly appointed committee members will be elected by the committee to serve as the chair. I'm just gonna leave it at that. We don't do that, you know. that is- Okay, so right,
Could you just add member?
yeah.
Like committee.
Soccer practice.
Oh, I didn't authorize this one.
Oh, no, I gotta get my son from soccer, so.
It just isn't exciting enough.
It's very exciting. I guess I thought, you know, maybe, I didn't know the academic end stuff was gonna take so long. I thought I'd get to sit in more, but, yeah.
Go get him from soccer. You're good.
Alright. See you guys.
See you, Matt.
For the first sentence, one of the duly appointed committee members will be elected by the committee to serve as the chair. So one of the duly appointed
I really,
one of the members of the board.
how does it never really appointed, we're all. Board member. Can we just eliminate that part of it?
Yes.
Because we're all doing it, we're not appointed, we're not appointed.
There, a board member will be elected by the committee to serve as the chair.
There you go.
There you go.
I don't
Good.
think you can prove on that one.
Oh,
Will be elected by the committee to serve as the chair. It's like making sausage. Responsibilities of the chair will be to construct, publish. Okay, got it. Okay, so does anybody have gonna give me grief about writing the finance committee charter? Since we now have a finance committee. I'll use the same kind of framework and bring it back at the next meeting. So we can review it.
You know, there's a little typo at the bottom of that first page also,
Yeah, committee.
where the word committee got pushed down.
Yeah, I agree. Committee got pushed down. So it's committee approved instead of
Right.
approved.
There will be a standing board.
Yes. Committee will be a standing board. There will be no chairs. We just said that there would be a chair.
Right.
Standing desks. Sorry. I digress.
And what did you change membership to?
Membership. Oh, the committee will be a committee of the whole with administration participation in 3 ICEA nominated members TBD. Okay?
Now, I do think that still maybe is a little ambiguous about whether those ICA members are members of the committee.
I understand.
Yeah.
But at least we're not saying that you must be an ICEA.
Actually, if you say ICA nominated members, it makes them sound like they are definitely members of the committee, not members of the ICA. The whole point of doing it that way is that they wouldn't have to be members of the ICA.
Right.
Are you saying that they're members of the committee, though? How about just participation?
Participants?
Well, with participation from the administration and the ICEA nominated
Persons.
participants.
Persons.
Three staff members, you could say, nominated by the ICEA.
There you go. Three staff members nominated by the ICA. And we'll take out the TBD.
I think that makes it clear that they're not members of the committee, they're staff members.
Well, that's it, membership.
That word is causing a lot of problems.
But aren't they members of the? No, they're not. Okay, got it. Never mind. We're good. So the committee will be a committee of the whole with administration participation and 3 staff members nominated by the ICEA.
But that's it, membership.
No, participation from the administration. Participation, you want that participation to apply to both groups. With participation of the administration and 3 staff members nominated, blah, blah, blah. You can have their participation.
I'll switch them.
That's clear on participation facilities.
So participation by administration and 3 staff members nominated by the ICEA.
Yeah, still not 100%, right, is it? Well,
worse.
No, I was sighing because we just wrote that last year when we started when we brought back Education Committee, and it's really messy.
Well, I think the idea is to make it clear that they sit at the table, right? That they're not just sitting out there in the chairs. They're part of the group for purposes of the things that we're discussing, even if they're not going to vote.
Do you need to change that? Right above it, where it says membership then?
Let's see. Oh, it does say membership, doesn't it?
I mean, we're trying to get away from membership.
Membership and participation. I don't know.
What is that? Makeup or?
You could have two sentences. Committee would be a committee of the whole, period.
Yeah.
Something about someone's, should include participation.
Period. Scratch with. Members of it, not members, not gonna use that word. Administrative. Administrators and 3 staff members nominated by the ICA will also participate.
There you go. In committee discussions. Just wanted to throw that out there.
I'm not adding the word committee one more time to that.
It's a whole new sentence though.
I like the two sentences. I think it's-
Let's use some colons, we'll be all set.
Perfect. Okay. Did anybody have any suggestions on ops? Because I really didn't see anything wrong with ops. I didn't think they were changing anything from the way they were operating. And I didn't see any typos, except there's some consistency when we say the committee will consist of 3 board members and 2 alternates, and 3 is a word and 2 is a number.
True.
And I see that
Spell them both out.
Change them all the words.
Put a period at the end of that last sentence.
in
So,
my
put them
humble
all
opinion,
words.
anything under 100 should be a word, not a number, in general. And that's also under policy and governance. There's that fine tooth comb. All right. So Diane had some input on Appendix 4.
She did.
We're going to have to be wholesale changed.
Yep, and Brian had a question about number 7 on there. And yeah, you're right that No Child Left Behind no longer requires us to report that information, but the state legislature still does. So we'll still report this information to the board, and it'll come through the annual progress report. It will change once we move to Smarter Balance, once that legislation's finalized.
Okay, but we just, I mean, all we
So-
have to do is scratch NCLB.
It may be, there might be some additional pieces that we might need to look at with the Smarter Balance thing, depending on how it falls out, depending on what they write in the legislation, probably. So,
I'm just saying,
Okay, now-
that for number 7, we could just say reporting for
Yeah.
total and subgroup performance, scratch NCLB.
yeah,
And say federal legislation and state legislation require local school districts.
right. Yep, you can do that.
Actually, federal legislation pretty much encompasses every school succeeds, or NCLB, right?
It's one of those things, though, I mean, if it's just there because the law is requiring us to do it, and we have to do it even if it wasn't there, it would be easier to just have a sentence saying,
Federal.
district will comply with all federal and state reporting requirements about, academic achievement data, period. Or is it helpful to have it down in our policy? Because then every time it changes, you're going to go back to this policy.
Well,
And
I would suggest, at least at this point in time, I wouldn't do anything more
Yeah.
than just cross out NCLB, leave that, because we're gonna have to go back and look at the entire Appendix 4 as we move through this school year with whatever mess we get from the state.
You mean whatever exciting changes.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever exciting changes
We're
we get
changing
from
to
the
a
state.
language of positivity.
Asset conversation.
Asset conversation.
Whatever opportunities the state creates for us.
Wow, it's getting deep in here.
Okay. So other than the items that, why is my computer shut down now?
Really?
I'm dead serious.
I think that means the end of the meeting, Brian.
I think it does. But we still haven't talked about ends and means. Director Wrestler, we're beyond an hour. Tell me all about ends and means. Tell me what you like about our flow chart,
Oops. Oh, what is
or what you don't like about our flow chart. This is actually lifted from something. I've seen this somewhere else. It is.
Could be, I have no clue, Art.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Pretty sure I saw it on like another district's.
May have.
Pretty sure. Either they took it from us or we took it from them. They probably said, what is Iowa City doing?
Why doesn't this move? And as a matter of fact, just so you know, I inherited that flow chart, so who was the progenitor of it? Me with my 7 years of institutional knowledge, only Kim's got more sitting at the table.
And it's been
It's been there
that
since,
since
yeah.
I've started working with policies and
Well, that's fine. I mean,
Now you know what we know.
I just remember coming across it somewhere and going, hey, that's our Appendix 1.
It strikes me as aspirational in the extreme. And I can't tell, it doesn't seem to be, I mean, it sounds like it is aspirational, or, you know, it's designed to assist the board. I don't interpret this to be kind of mandatory in the way that some things are, and it's in an appendix. I never quite know what that means, why something's in an appendix and not in a policy. It's a flow chart.
Do they understand that our appendices are not
I
appendices
don't
to
always
any
find it
policies?
particularly helpful. Sometimes I find it hard to take
Okay.
literally. As long as it's not gonna
Paul's new to that
formally
idea.
tie anybody's hands, I don't object to one more resource people can think about when they're doing policy. Why is it an appendix instead of a policy?
Paul's new to this, so Paul, I'll just share with you that the appendices are not actually appendices to any policies. They're standalone items. So it's not like blah, 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 appendix to that. It's simply, an appendix is a standalone document. We inherited that.
It's as if after you remove someone's appendix, you just have the appendix.
And the person lives on.
Maybe not, but the person doesn't matter, it's the appendix.
Yeah. So they're not actually appendices to anything. So Kim and I discovered that about 4 years ago through part of another investigative process.
You know, it's funny, we have, at the law school, I get involved with some of this stuff also, against my will recently, but, you know, we have all these policies, they're not all in one place. They're not consistent with what we've written in the student handbook because it never gets updated. And the problem is, again, it's not necessarily the best use of anyone's person's time to go through and fix those types of problems.
On that note, I'm going to say we make no changes to Appendix 1. Okay. Does anybody have a dissenting opinion about the standalone Appendix 1? If the goal is to guide us when we're considering writing a policy, then I think it functions just fine. In fact, I was thinking about this as far as a recent policy that we had to rescind. Had they followed this flow chart, might not have been quite the. So I was just thinking about that when I was reading through this. Just saying. Is it
Motion to adjourn be premature?
Negative. It would be overdue, in my humble opinion.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right. Oh, crap,